Good morning. This episode of the morning meeting could feature vast technical difficulties, so that's always exciting. Up now, I see everybody. Welcome in. Good morning. Thank you for joining. Sean, not here yet. Dan has been in place for hours.
Yep.
I am wearing one of my favorite pieces of clothing. This is a hoodie from the 2012 Olympics held in New York City. Sean, do you remember who medaled at that Olympics in New York City?
Absolutely, but I'll let Dan take it
No one did because this is a
because it
hoodie
didn't
from a.
happen. That was
It
the
didn't. It didn't
Bloomberg.
happen. Didn't
Yeah,
happen. But
I'm
look.
not sure. I bet you got that because Mayor Bloomberg spent a ton of cash creating
It,
swag.
you could walk over my house. I got China service for 14 people, all with the 2012 Olympic logo on it. I got mugs. I got hats. There was a lot of swag for the Olympics that never happened. It's a very comfortable hoodie, and that's why I'm wearing it. Good morning. Happy Wednesday to everybody. This is the morning meeting based on the network news division's morning meetings where they talk about what's happening during the day. Ours is a little different. Rather than being snarky and very liberal, ours has peace, love, and understanding for all and the presumption of grace for all. And we're just here for the facts, ma'am and mister. Thank you. If you're joining here on the two-way platform, raise your hand. Raise it high and proud electronically, particularly if you've never done it before. We'd love to have some first timers today. Saturday Night Live has the Five Timers Club. We have the First Timers Club. We're delighted to have you be part of this enterprise. If you're watching on YouTube or X, congratulations for finding us, even though you haven't figured out yet how to get on the platform itself to raise your electronic hand and ask a question. Someday you'll figure it out. You'll be as smart as Professor Kenny, who figured it out. And I'm going to run through the day book about it's a very busy day, as we say in the news business. And then Sean, Dan, and I are going to kick around a bunch of stuff. Mostly, we're just going to talk about whether Kamala and Doug are moving to our neighborhood. That's really going to be the focus of today's program. So if that doesn't interest you, go watch Bill Hemmer and Dana Perino on Fox or
Can I?
Joe
Can I?
Enrica.
Before we do
Yes,
that,
sir.
I
Please.
know that.
For what purpose does the gentleman from both Virginia and Rhode Island rise?
Thanks to the gentleman, the chair, for recognizing me. Parliamentary inquiry.
Yes,
Um,
sir.
while we are enamored, at least two of the three of us, as to where they might live, I think there's a greater and broader political question, which is if you're scoping out places, whether it's in your neighborhood or Dan's, it would lead me to believe that that rules out running for the state of California's governor.
It would seem that way. As some of you know, I have been a deep skeptic that she would run for governor of California. And if she does, what we're talking about is page 6, New York Post reports today. You can put that thing up now.
Which is the Bible if you live
The
in New York,
Bible.
right?
If it's on page 6, it's almost certainly true. Page 6 is reporting. I'll read the headline aloud to you. I would have rewritten this headline to make it a little bit more page 60, but Kamala Harris eyeing post-lost life in NYC as second gentleman tours 20K a month luxury space. So this is right near Lincoln Center, right near
Does
Columbus
that get you a
Circle.
full bedroom, or is that a bedroom with a shared bathroom?
It's got a pull down bed. No,
Murphy bed.
even a Murphy bed. Even with Biden Harris inflation, 20K buys you something pretty nice.
It's pretty
It's
good.
in the shadow, as Dan has pointed out, of the Trump International Hotel, what used to be the Paramount building. Convenient access to subways, as Sean told us before. If you're vice president, you get Secret Service protection for 6 months, and then as long as the threat lasts, near Central Park, near Lincoln Center. You can walk to Broadway. It's near Maria, one of Sean's favorite New York hotspots. And so forget the day book. This is all we care about. Dan, are they moving to New York City? Pros and cons. The Clintons talked about moving to New York City. They went to
Yeah.
Westchester. The Obamas looked at apartments too, if I remember correctly. They ended up, as far as I know, not buying anything here. But I think they might do this. I think they might want a New York place for all sorts of reasons. What say you?
Yes. I mean, well, the Clintons famously looked at co-ops, which would not let them in.
Right, that's right.
Not to get into the details of New York real estate. Yeah, I absolutely could see her. She lived in a condo downtown in DC, right in the West End in Foggy Bottom there. So she seems to like apartment life. I have actually seen both her and her husband separately in Central Park on the weekends, going for walks, like power walking. So they clearly like kind of being, up on the Upper West Side in that area. So yeah, I mean, maybe she'll run for mayor, or maybe she'll take on Kathy Hochul, run for governor, like Robert F. Kennedy. New York welcomes people.
Sean, the place they looked at, 3 blocks from James's school. So on days when I'm too busy to pick them up, maybe they can fill
Yeah.
in.
Yeah,
What do you?
I can speak from experience. That's a huge benefit to the neighborhood.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll talk more about it. If you've got questions about that, raise your hand. If you've got tips, and I'll make the obvious joke. One thing New York is known for is those Korean delis with salad bars. So she'd have an opportunity to
Woo!
get
We're going
salads.
early.
All right. Day book. Joe Biden, 8 o'clock tonight, primetime Oval Office address. I toured Green Bay diners yesterday. All anybody's talking about. The anticipation. What will he say? I'll be curious to see what he says. Curious to see what the ratings is. I'm sure he's going to rewrite it up until the last minute. Uh, as Joe Biden would say, good luck in your senior year. This is a hard one to pull off. Sitting in the Oval Office, there will be an audience. The vice president and others will be in the room, but it is a hard speech to give under any circumstances. And Sean, what's the over/under on how many times he quotes one of his relatives? As
No
Grandma
joke,
Finnegan,
folks.
as Grandma Finnegan used to say, no joke.
No joke, guys. They used to say, Joey, tell more stories about your uncle.
All right,
I
here's
think there's a good.
Does
there's a
Donald
good
Trump live tweet it?
yeah. All right.
uh,
That's what I want to know. I also want to know if he ends by saying, "There's nothing we can't do. We're the United States
we're
of
American.
America." But I can guarantee you this: my word is a Halperin. The last phrase will be, "God protect our troops." Good night. Good luck. We'll come back to that. 1:30. Karine Jean-Pierre briefs. Kamala Harris. Again, her schedule says she's going to attend the president's farewell address. But earlier in the day, here's what she's doing. You may want to write this down, so I'll speak slowly. The vice president will be in Washington, D.C., where she will receive briefings and conduct internal meetings with staff. These meetings will be closed press. No idea what Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are doing today. 10 o'clock Eastern Time, Gretchen Whitmer is giving a speech at the Detroit Auto Show. Go to my Substack for the YouTube link. Previewed it heavily in Politico Playbook with a British accent. And it's quite a robust speech. I've been skeptical that she's ever going to run for president. That's been my perspective. This speech is a very big play for in the excerpts for being part of the national conversation. We'll come back and talk about that in a minute. Congress, noon, Senate considers the Laken Riley Act. 1:30, Hakeem Jeffries holds a news conference. What is happening on the Hill today, no fewer than six, count them six, Trump nominees are up for their hearings. Pam Bondi, Attorney General, Marco Rubio, State, Chris Wright, Energy, Sean Duffy, Transportation, John Radcliffe, CIA, and Russ Vogt, OMB. So those will be happening all day, and the good folks at C-SPAN will bring much of it to you live. I'll be curious to see what, if any, coverage it gets on the commercial cablers. We'll see about that. So that's what's happening today. Let's talk about the Hegseth hearing. Dan and I foreshadowed yesterday incorrectly that it might be bumpy. We did say all along it was going to depend on his performance. His performance was fantastic. His team and he planned carefully. Everybody knew going in what the game was. Democrats had to create enough of a kerfuffle that some of the Republicans felt hesitant about voting for him and then hope for more disclosures. They got there right on cue. Jane Mayer, New Yorker piece with more allegations. His team and the nominee himself executed brilliantly, not flawlessly. The Democrats, I wrote my newsletter this morning, better than normal, but nowhere near good enough. The cliche applies. They did not lay, I don't know if they didn't lay a glove on him or a hand on him, but they did no laying on him. Sean, going forward, no reason to review a hearing that's practically a day old. Going forward, what are the lessons for Team Trump and the Democrats from the Hegseth confirmation kerfuffle, less kerfuffle?
When I was the comms director of the budget committee in the House, we used to basically, the great thing about the chairman at the time is he understood that the hearing was basically a show. I mean, just to be blunt, and that you wanted it to be, you could script, you knew the aspects that you could script. There is a name, and I'm sure he's going to get furious for me saying it, but there's a guy when you look at Pete walking down the hallways or in meetings, a tall gentleman, rather thin, light colored glasses, light color hair, named Eric Euland. If you want to get confirmed, get Eric Euland to run your confirmation. And yesterday's hearing had Eric Euland's fingerprints all over it. When the members had, are you shaking your head no? Or
no, I'm agreeing vociferously, and I'm thinking like you wouldn't need like Columbo to find his fingerprints. His fingerprints were all over the whole place. Keep going. You're absolutely right.
One of the things, and I think this is why this platform is so great, we can actually talk about this. when each of the members started their talk, their questioning, and they said, before I start, let me introduce I want a letter here from Mark Halperin of two-way for, by the way, it's Dan Scavino's birthday. He just tweeted, he just texted. So anyway.
Happy birthday, Dan.
Happy birthday, Dan Scavino. And I mean, they were so far ahead of the curve. So you could literally see Eric Ueland putting in somebody's hand, you know, when they got up and said, before Senator so-and-so gets going, let me just say, I want to read this letter from Mark Halperin of two-way to say that Pete Hegseth worked for me. He was a phenomenal employee. He was at work every day and everyone loved him and he balanced the budget. That was a huge takeaway for every nominee to say, you got ahead of the narrative, you put something in the record, you got ahead of the Dem attack on whether it was workplace or budgeting or whatever. I think that was phenomenal. And I think it's a template for going forward. Secondly, they were ready for the Dem attacks. And I will say this, I know you don't like to look in the rearview mirror, but I think there were three things that stuck with me kind of coming out of that where the Dems tried to go after them.
Try to apply them to the future.
Well, I know. So Tim Kaine goes after him on drinking. And part of this was I don't know if the senators themselves were ready to go or they were teed up, but Mark Wayne Mullins' response to Tim Kaine, do you want to make alcohol use a new criteria? How many senators have been drunk voting? Do you want to get into marital infidelity? Tim Kaine, that was Hillary Clinton's running mate. I mean, they hit back very specifically, and it wasn't like a nudge. It was a punch in the face. To be honest with you, there were only two efforts. I think Pete did this on his feet, but it's something for going forward. When Senator Warren tried to go after him about his pledge not to go into the defense industry afterwards, and Pete literally just said, "I'm not a general." It was, to me, you know, if we want to play this forward, be ready. I mean, it was funny. It was spontaneous.
Okay, but let me say something about that. You're right. It was funny, quote. You're right. It was spontaneous. No, it wasn't. But it played well in the room. Even though he's wrong on the merits. Elizabeth Warren's right on the merits. It's just the same principle.
Oh, no. Sure, fair enough.
But this is something that's forward-looking. If you're a nominee, you want the room to be your soundtrack. The room was filled with his supporters. So when he fights with Elizabeth Warren and he tells a joke, there's going to be laughter at her expense. That's not organic. That's another Eric Ueland fingerprints. Turtles on
that
fence
room
posts.
was filled with. You saw when he got up to leave, everybody wanted to take a photo with him. They were Navy SEALs.
Applause, laughter. That's a huge advantage. Home court advantage.
And I think that was, again, very smart. They lined up a ton of folks to flood the zone. I also think, to your point, there was no reason not to say, sure, I agree with you, Senator. But anyway, and then the last thing is, and I wish the one thing that Democrats, I think, at least from online, is when Tammy Duckworth went after him on ASEAN. Now, as a former assistant U.S. trade rep, I was thinking to myself in my head, that's a political and economic association of Southeastern Asian countries. And I kept thinking to myself, okay, it's been a while since I was in that job. Maybe there's a military aspect that I've never been aware of.
Yeah.
Sure enough, there's not. I think that Pete managed to get through that. And that, if you want to, again, look forward on it, it was, how do you make the best of a situation where it was an attempt to do a gotcha question, but it was a stupid gotcha question, not understanding. And I can throw out 18 more trade terms, AGOA, APEC. I mean, I've been to several ASEAN meetings. I've never heard about a military nexus. I mean, you can talk about the strategic aspects of ASEAN, but it's an economic and political group of Southeastern Asian countries, not a military one. But I thought he handled that well as well. And I thought it was a stupid attempt to make a gotcha moment that fell flat. So I think they had their senators teed up. They had
including the chairman. The chairman was like it was like a ventriloquist dummy for Eric Ueland. Just whatever the chairman needed to say, he said, including keeping it to one round.
But can I make one point that I will say this. I thought, to your point, Eric Ueland did a phenomenal job of orchestrating. This is what he does. He knows those senators. He has those relationships. I think that where I would say going forward, the response in support of Pete online within MAGA world was truly organic. Meaning,
Yep.
Euland handled the senators and the Senate in that room brilliantly. I didn't hear a damn word from anyone on Pete's team or MAGA world. Every tweet that I put out, every response that I put out, and everyone that I talked to was organically coming to Pete's defense because they believed in him. There was nothing on the comm side that was done to support Pete that I'm aware of. I mean, and that's to your point about going forward. Like, Pete has a great team of people that believe in him. He's got a Fox former colleagues. He's got people in the military community, in the VSO community that are behind him organically. And that's what he had going for him. Other people may not have that benefit, but there was no effort that I'm aware of to give people talking points, to give them rebuttals. It was everything that happened yesterday was truly organic.
Well, hold on, Dan, hold on 1 second. I just want to respond to there. First of all, the team is more than just Eric Euland. There are other people, and they're all.
Oh, no, I know that, but he led it.
I know. I agree. I'm just saying there are other folks. There was a comms effort, and it keyed off of what the nominee said, right? The nominee talks about woke. He talks about the liberal media attacks. He talks about being for the fighting men and women, particularly the fighting men. Occasionally, he would just say men. But the biggest undercovered story in politics today is this organism, digital organism that spans from Mar-a-Lago to the West Coast to Silicon Valley to the grassroots to the meme makers. There's this enterprise. It's not just something Democrats don't have. It's never existed before quite like this. And that enterprise was in service of Hegseth. The inside game and the outside game rhymed with each other the whole day.
You took my line. I'm sat here waiting to use it.
But Mark, I mean, like, with all due respect, unless you want to confess something that I'm not aware of, as somebody that is an unabashed supporter of this administration and these things, you might be getting fed things as a journalist, but I can tell you in my conversations with people yesterday, the rebuttal to Pete was not at the behest, which it has been in certain issues during the campaign and whatever. I did not see it.
The rebuttal meaning hold on. I'm sorry, Dan. We'll give you the floor for as long as you want it. The rebuttal to him where?
Meaning, so normally before a debate or before a big thing, you'll get flooded. Hey, these are the key points. The president's going to say this. These are the issues. The people that I talked to, and myself included, everything that I said and did on behalf of Pete yesterday was organic. It did not come from a talking point or an email or anything that said, hey, here are the key points. And so I guess my point is, if you got stuff, it was as a journalist, I would assume so, not as a supporter, but I was unaware of any effort from any comms effort on behalf of Pete.
Well, it was all done. A lot of it is organic, but it's all done to rhyme with what was happening for months about what the talking points are, what he was going to say, and people keying off what he said. But again, the larger point I'm making is this enterprise exists. It's what saved his nomination last year by gearing.
Yeah, but you're asking about going forward, and my point is, as a former comms guy on campaigns on the Hill, I didn't take it for granted that people say, oh, I'm sure they know what to say today. It was, here's the points, cue off of this. I'm going to forward you 5 tweets. I'm going to make sure you know what the message is. I want to make sure that we're driving something. Everything that I saw yesterday was because people who know Pete, who support Pete, who support the movement were tweeting or commenting on it.
So we're not afraid to get in the weeds here, but this goes deep into the weeds. But here's my response to what you're saying. They were confident enough that the inside game would get them 50 votes or 53 votes, that they didn't want to hit the tripwire, which they hit at points last year, which is pissing off some of these senators by people going after them, right? They didn't want the comms to create a bad cop potential backlash. So Joni Ernst could say, why are they attacking me in Iowa? It pisses me off. So I think that's the reason why, because they didn't want fingerprints on something that would suggest grassroots pressure, because they didn't think they
but there's a difference between grassroots pressure and actually getting the point across. Emphasize his service. get this out.
Yeah.
Go after Elizabeth Warren. That's not pressure on that's a tactic, what you're talking about, going after wavering senators. That's very different than what I'm talking about. I'm talking about an actual coordinated strategy.
All right, I'm going to send you something after the show. Dan, thank you for
Well,
waiting.
I'll be short here. I just think what the hearing showed looking forward is that the Trump inside game is superior in 2.0 than it was in 1.0, and that they still have that outside game and the hammer to bring when they need it, which, as you say, Mark, they did earlier. And for Democrats, we need to up our game, right? I mean, I think you saw on display, like Chuck Schumer said, we're going to get back on offense. We're going to, try to make some moments. We're going to try to rough them up. And it was so inauthentic for some of those members. I mean, it was like they had too much coffee. They were wound up. Like some of them were just outright embarrassing in their tone. I think the substance, there was a lot of merit to what they were saying, but it was lost in the kind of just showmanship that was just so over the top. So I think, Trump's got two different, guns to fire now, and inside and obviously the outside. And for Democrats, we need to up our game.
What was fascinating to me, Dan, was they tried to, and you saw this with Alyssa Slotkin from Michigan. She tried to present him with these hypotheticals about what would you do if President Trump did this horrible hypothetical thing. And Hegseth, I think, effectively said, I'm not going to take the bait, right? And I kept thinking to myself, why are you, instead of making this about Trump, if you had gone after Hegseth by baiting him on a hypothetical that wasn't Trump relevant, right? So let's say that you have an enlisted sailor or soldier that comes to you and does the following. Would you have a problem with that, right? Oh, you would? Well, then, let's escalate it. They came in starting with Trump, and Pete knew exactly how to handle that, which was, I'm not going to engage in hypotheticals about President Trump or any right, or advice I'd give him. I think tactically and strategically, they came at this completely wrong. They thought that they could get the nominee to undermine President Trump, and no one, whether it's Pete Hegseth or a nominee to be named later, is dumb enough to take that bait.
Well, I thought, it's interesting. The one place I thought actually that was, I wanted to hear more was Angus King poking around on kind of, the Geneva Convention and the rules of engagement. And I actually thought Hegseth started veering off the talking points a little bit, talking about, well, in certain circumstances, the world's different today, and we may have to do what we have to do. And there was very few Republicans coming to his defense on that front. But again, and Angus King was calm. He was measured. I mean, he's a Mainer, right? So he's not going to like flamethrow. But just, so many other instances, I thought they lost control of everything.
But you're right. You're touching on something. I think the way that it was like a lawyer.
Yeah, exactly.
It was like when Mark Halperin interviews you, right? He starts off as, there was a meeting in a bar 5 years ago. You were there, right? Oh, yeah, I was there. Okay, at that meeting. I mean, like, he pulled the string in a way. Again, this gets back to the tactic and the overall strategy. The way that you string somebody into the conversation. And he talked initially about his faith and and got Hegseth to engage in a way. Whereas these other guys came at him like, full on, like if Trump, started World War III and you had to push the button, would you? And it was like, dude, what do you think he's going to say?
Dan, if Chuck Schumer said, I want you to address the caucus, the chiefs of staff, the comms director, and the staff's directors for these upcoming committees, and you give them 3 bullet points. How can we do better at the subsequent confirmation hearings? What are your 3 bullet points?
What is our North Star? What are we trying to achieve? And what's the long game here? Like that to me was lost. Are you trying to tank the nomination? Who's going to tank it? You need Republicans to vote against it. So what is our strategy to lead them to that water? As a party, we're trying to win back the working class. We're trying to create a better brand and not, with woke and stuff. So what are we doing going into these hearings to get back on that front? Because what I saw yesterday was just people trying to like out-Trump Trump. Can I scream the loudest? Can I be the most angry? Can I show the base that I am just going to fight and cut them off? And it's like Kamala Harris in the debate. Not going to let him get off the mat. I'm going to prove it. Like, what is our game plan to achieve our results? And that is what I would say. Start with that. And then everything else, people need to be who they are, be authentic, ask the questions you care about, probe, but like, how can we, if the goal is to tank the nomination, how can we lead those Republicans to that water?
So the one thing that was interesting, by the way, and I was actually fascinated because Mark asked yesterday, will they ask hard questions? And I know some people might not, but when Tim Sheehy from Montana said to him, you know, how many rounds is in a magazine of an M4, right? Standard issue. And he said 30, depending on the clip. And then he's going through, like, there was something that came across about understanding the role of today's warfighter. And, you know, part of, if again, I'm not giving advice, but like there was a lack of understanding. If you're going to go after the nominee and try to prove that they're unqualified, why not focus on issues related to the Department of Defense? How many ships are in the Navy right now? I mean,
yeah,
but,
we can talk about
my
this all
point
day.
is that if the goal,
Yeah.
that if the point is to actually undermine the person's credibility, then the comments that they asked yesterday were irrelevant. What is the current budget of the Pentagon? I mean, why not get into substance?
Right. All right. I want to do 3 more topics in a hurry. So answer quick, like, you know, like a rapid round kind of thing. All right, because I want to get to everybody's questions. Mark Caputo continues to be the scoop machine he always is at Axios, his new home. And he has a story out this morning that says people are just donating money to Trump, you know, including crypto people, where $1 million used to be kind of the baseline of like, oh my God, somebody gave $1 million. Now it's like 10 million. And so they're raising money for super PACs. They're raising money for the inaugural. They're raising money for the library. Mark says 500 million. My guess is that the meter's still running. The Democrats don't have anything like this right now. They don't have a majority in Congress. They don't have the incumbent in the White House. So Dan, as someone who's raised a lot of money for Democrats, who knows what they'll spend it on, but certainly it will help with the outside game for the super PAC. And they plan to have a very robust political operation, as presidents have. But again, all the ways that this is not a normal second-term president. Normally, a second-term president doesn't have the kind of outside, grassroots, astroturf thing. This seems like it's going to be very robust. How big of an asymmetrical advantage this is, and can Democrats compete with this?
Oh, it's a huge advantage. You always want more money. Look, Trump has 2 things going for it that Democrats don't. One, he's very transactional, right? So people feel like, hey, I need to be at the table. I need to make this guy happy. The second is people fear Trump. Trump likes an enemy and he likes a target. And if you get on the wrong side, right, everything we just talked about will be turned against you. Democrats have neither the power to exact revenge nor the power to, transact in the positive. So I think with those 2 things, it is a fundraiser's dream, and I have no doubt they'll keep going.
Sean.
So it's not just the money. I think Dan's absolutely right on the money part. Although I get what sort of the New York Times has previously reported, which I think is hysterical, is people are giving money and saying, no, I don't want anything returned. I don't need any tickets. Just take the money. I mean, Dan knows this. Normally you're like, hey, I can give you 4 front row this. I can give you 2 events in the future. And people are literally giving money and saying, no. I just want you to, I want to make sure is that FEC reported, or is that going to be public, which is so different than normally when you raise money. It's, can I give it in a way that I give it to a dark money group so no one knows? I think the environment, I've commented on this in the past. You saw the CEO of Coke down there. If you haven't online, I think I tweeted that, but it's like the CEO of Coke is presenting him with this inaugural commemorative bottle of Coke.
Diet Coke.
Yeah. Although
I've asked for one.
In my fridge downstairs, I can give you a bottle of the 2000 and the 2016. I saved too much crap, but I guess the point is that it's, when I was thinking about this in 2016, we had these enormous resistance headwinds coming in, corporate America. This is not just big financially, but it takes a quiver out of the Democrats, an arrow out of their quiver, because they normally had one of these big institutions, corporate America, that was ready to kind of fight with them against Donald Trump. And now it's not just the money, but they don't have the backup that they did before. And that's equally as important.
Yeah. Do you guys know the definition of rapid round?
Who's this?
What's that? Okay.
What?
I'm dumping 2 topics. We'll talk about TikTok being banned later in the week. We'll talk about the most disappointing Biden cabinet member because we have what passes for maybe quasi-breaking news. The Washington Post has just published, 201 please, a new interview with Jill Biden in which she says regarding Nancy Pelosi, we were friends for 50 years. It was disappointing. And here's how the article begins. The First Lady says she's at peace with this ending, but, quote, let's just say I was disappointed with how it unfolded. Reporter, why? Jill, I don't know. I learned a lot about human nature. Reporter, meaning? Quote, I think that's all I'm going to say. So I continue to be perplexed by the Biden final days messaging strategy. Sean, Dan, how will this Jill interview land in the Democratic world?
Oh, it's just going to rekindle all of the tension. And as Biden gets ready to give his farewell speech tonight, this is what is going to be chatted about on cable. It's going to be in every conversation leading up to and probably after this speech. I mean, Harris is going to be sitting in the Oval Office. Like, it's just going to be, as you say, you scratch your head, and I'll be curious, how much he talks about his presidency tonight versus career, and how much is positive, a la like Reagan in '88, who I think gave the template for going out short and sweet, versus kind of the bitter complaining, which he's been doing a lot of.
Sean.
I'm somewhat, number one, I agree with Dan. I'm looking forward to the speech tonight and how long it lasts. The angle that he takes is this trying to be but two things. One, this goes back to what we've talked about over and over again on this program, which is it's amazing to me how long, they've had since November, and they are literally just jamming out stuff saying, how much time is left before we have to move out? Let's just get a story out. Let's go announce this. Let's pardon these people. They're throwing the kitchen sink. And I think the difference is because of Biden's age, they know that they don't have the time in the post-presidency to work on the legacy aspects that a normal president would. But I think that Jill Biden's saying something that, frankly, I'm shocked that somebody who's been in politics or around politics this long. What really people in Washington are transactional. They will throw you over as soon as they can. We're negotiating a trade agreement back in the mid 2000s, and Charlie Rangel looked at us and said, I'm with you until I'm not. And I thought that was like the best Washington quote ever. Like, it's welcome to politics.
That'd be good. A t-shirt with the morning meeting logo, and the front says I'm with you, and then the back says ... till I'm not.
Till I'm not.
All right, let's bring everybody in again. If you'd like to be in the conversation, please raise your hand. We're going to start with someone on whose back two-way was built. Katie Reeves. Katie, Happy New Year. Welcome in.
Happy New Year.
Katie's in the Badger State, aka Wisconsin. Thank you for joining. What's on your mind, young lady?
Well, I was listening yesterday when you guys were discussing the possibility of having maybe a CEO from Silicon Valley or something run for governor. And having lived there for as a Republican for 15 years and saw the dysfunction that I think goes so far deep that you really can't the governor can't do a whole lot. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are if we start to see things like Doge happening statewide for certain states or even big cities or things like that.
Well, you're seeing that with, Kelly Ayotte in New Hampshire immediately talked about what she kind of calling it like Coge or something. She kind of affectionately riffing off of it. I think you're going to see efforts like this. It's a very populist thing to talk about, government efficiency, competence, et cetera. So I wouldn't be surprised to see some mayors jump on board with it, et cetera.
Katie, I don't think anybody wants to defend the status quo right now. And so I think running as a change agent, running to Sean's point on making services better, more efficient, doing things, doing more with less type of argument, I think is a very powerful message in today's environment.
Katie, who's your favorite Trump cabinet nominee and why?
Oh, I don't know, I kind of like Tulsi.
Yeah,
I guess none of them jump out at me really.
Yeah, what do you like? You like her for that job, or just more generally?
It's just more generally.
Yeah. Katie, thanks for joining. Great question. Please come back regularly. Bill, welcome in. Tell folks where you are who don't know what's on your mind, and thank you for joining.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm Bill from Connecticut. I sort of sit middle right, and just wanted to thank this platform in particular for making national politics local. You know, it's a weird thing. I always talk about engagement at the local level, but this is actually a discussion that brings the national politics to the local. So I appreciate that and the opportunity.
Thank you, sir. That's generous of you.
Where in Connecticut are you?
Yeah, same question.
So I live in Glastonbury outside of Hartford. My sister-in-laws all went to Hampden Hall. So that's your way, Dan. The answer to the question is it's not Sally's or Pepe's. It's Modern for the best pizza in Connecticut, in my opinion.
I went to Hampden Hall in middle school. So
unless you're looking for Irish pizza, and then you got to go down to Stamford and get Colony Pizza.
By the way, they got a Colony Pizza now in Northern Virginia.
I know they do. None are as good as the original.
So
they've sprung a couple.
It's the wrong water. They don't have Connecticut water.
They
Bill,
packaged
Haven's
it.
finest.
Bill, are you
Packaged it and they're shipping it to Florida. So I heard Florida's getting better pizza as we speak.
Bill, are you putting clams on your modern pizza?
Ooh.
Personally, I'm from upstate New York, so I'm not a clam pizza guy by default, but I don't hate it. I got to be honest. And if you go to bar and get mashed potato pizza, you're doing just as fine there too. So
don't tell anyone, but I've never been to Modern, but I've heard all about it.
Oh, it's great.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
All right, maybe this next weekend we'll go. All right, what's on your mind, sir, besides pizza at 9 a.m.?
Well, you know, sort of going off Dan's tweet yesterday and the start of the discussion today, you know, the committee hearing, in my opinion, was the opportunity for substance and a substantive discussion and an opportunity to show competence, right? Like it was felt so performative that I shut it down pretty early. I kind of knew where it was going all the way through, as soon as no big fireworks happened at the onset. You know, and coming off of sort of maybe Gavin Newsom and the mayor of Los Angeles's performance, like I feel like we're all looking for substance in leadership. You know, like whether you're left or right, you want to see people that are offering depth and substance. And I felt like yesterday just made me say, all right, I'm not going to bother wasting time looking at any of these hearings. Personally, I'm a small business owner. I wondered about his financial management of the nonprofits, but the hearing didn't go substantively in that direction. So it wasn't as if you were ever getting anything other than sort of packaged clickbait for, you know, whichever talking point you want to hear. So
let's be clear. Even in one round, it's a national disgrace how unsubstantive the hearing was. That's what the Republicans wanted, and that's what the nominee wanted. But and I understand why the Democrats didn't ask only substantive questions. They had a bunch of personal stuff for whatever reason. But it's a national disgrace. Forgetting what you think of the guy's qualifications, it is a national disgrace that he is on the precipice of becoming the head of the Pentagon maybe in a week. And we have no idea where he stands on China, on Australia, you know, like all these issues. So,
well, he did talk about AUKUS for what it's worth in response.
Exactly, for about 15 seconds.
Yeah. Which required me to go look it up.
I know more about what my doorman thinks about AUKUS than I do what Pete Hegseth does. Now, to be fair, my doorman's pretty interested in it, but
just to be, you know, look, if we're going to whack this hearing, let's just be clear that this is not an anomaly.
No, 100%. In fact, it was probably a little bit more excessively substantive than your norm, but it's still a national disgrace. I didn't mean to interrupt. Bill, I loved everything you said, so I'm not diminishing it, but did you want to ask a more pointed question, or was that it? Just about the lack of substance.
I just wonder with the coming hearings, you know, Dan's tweet was it coalesced Republicans around, hey, listen, these nominations have to go through. Do you think it sort of broke through the fracture, and we'll see that with early confirmations of the appointees?
I think it helps every other nominee for three reasons. One is they now have a template about how to do this, how to prepare, how to pack the room with supporters, how to work the chair of the committee, how to make sure everybody's got, you know, statements the way Sean cited. Number two, there's momentum now. There's just this notion of the train's leaving. Let's get everybody confirmed. Let's get the government up and running. And number three, these Republican sort of pressure for unity, like you don't want to cross Trump, like Joni Ernst set that template, don't cross Trump. So I think it helps them all. I still think Tulsi Gabbard is currently the most endangered, but I still think she's going to make it. Sean.
I think it'll be interesting too. The one thing that we're leaving out, I think everything we said about the hearing is absolutely right in terms of the template. But just remember that there's only so many resources. Having been through this process at a very high level before, you're kind of marshaling all your resources for some of the big ones, right? So you've got to be careful that at the same time you're not exposing, like for example, Chris Wright's up for energy today. I'm sure it'll be fine, but I don't think he's going to have the full set of resources that you did for Hegseth yesterday. And now he also won't have the attention, but this is sort of an interesting thing because suddenly somebody put faults and can you pounce on that, right? So I think that what's going to be interesting today is you got 6 of these folks up there, right. So all eyes are on Pam Bondi. But what happened?
You're looking live at the Senate Judiciary Committee. Pam Bondi getting roadblock coverage. Partial Ginsburg. Sean, sorry, go ahead. We'll just
but again, you got to your point. You have all the pieces of the puzzle, right? Grassley's been through this a bunch in this hearing that we're looking at now. He's going to be a great ally. He understands the process. He's got a great team around him that has been through this process before. But not every nominee is going to have the luxury of a Roger Wicker running the Senate Armed Services Committee and a team like Chuck Grassley has at Judiciary, right? So I only say that because this is an interesting dynamic that it's not like you take the same team. It's like playing a one team and then assuming you can just use the same strategy when you play the next team. There's a different board that's going to come, when each of these nominees come up, depending on the committee, the Republicans on the committee, the Democrats on the committee, and whether it's going to get TV coverage or not. So it's, like I said, having been through this, you've got to fight a bunch of different things going on at the same time. And it's a very challenging environment for the people leading the transition to keep that in mind.
Dan.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how the Democrats regroup here. Hopefully it's not kind of Al Gore in 2000, where in the second debate, he so overcorrected that it was, kind of almost equally as embarrassing. So, how do Democrats now approach these next hearings? I think the other thing is, look, give Trump credit. Like, he tends to pick people who are good on television, who are kind of understand the performative side of politics. I mean, Pam Bondi looks like she's out of central casting, right? She is comfortable in front of a camera. She is not going to be intimidated by a hearing. So I think he puts up people who tend to be big game players a little bit in terms of being in the spotlight. But I think, there will be Democrats who will learn from this and approach, and as Sean's point, when there's an opportunity, think fast on your feet, exploit it, but do it in a kind of, aggressive yet respectful way.
Bill, thank you for the great question and the pizza recommendation, and never put clams on pizza.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Come back regularly. Let's dip into the hearing a little bit, courtesy of our friends at StapStream.
That the FBI actually knew the dossier was false information and was likely a part of a Russian disinformation campaign. Even with the knowledge of such dossier defects and political infections, the
Sean, it almost seems like
Department sought
Senator Grassley's reading this
warrant
question.
renewals
Really?
and took other actions. After directing my
It almost seems like he
staff
knows what
to
he's asking,
investigate
too.
Justice Department's
Well, you notice
mishandlings
that
of the
this is
matter,
like before
the
we get
Justice
to the nominee,
Department
let's get through our
retaliated
grievances.
Yes.
in issuing a
It's the hearing
subpoena
of grievances.
for my own staff's phone
All right.
records.
All right, Senator.
That's right.
Let's get to the question.
Challenging my constitutional rights
Yes. Come on. I want to hear
of,
Pam Bondi say something.
of doing my
You may
oversight.
be waiting a while.
She's very
Yeah.
patient.
You might
All right,
want
what's
to.
next?
I'll
get
queue
a
up
cup of
another
coffee.
question
Then
here.
a few
I think the
Democratic
ranking member
colleagues
gets a
pressured
shot
the
after that.
FBI
Yeah, absolutely,
Foreign
yep.
Influence Task Force
But is this opening
to
statements or is this
supposedly bring
questions?
me and Senator
Opening?
Johnson related to
All
our
right.
Biden family
Mute
investigation.
that, please. Let's mute
On
that.
August the
You
20th,
can take it
Senator
down.
Johnson
Ronald, Ronald, whoever thought, Ronald, when you were growing up, that you would compete with Chuck Grassley and win for the attention of the morning meeting? Welcome in, Ronald. Thank you for joining. Tell folks who don't know where you are what's on your mind.
I have a comment, an idea, and then a question.
All right, where are
The
you
comment
located,
is,
sir? Where are you located?
Panhandle of Florida,
Okay, good.
District 1. We'll be having elections soon to replace
Are you
Mr.
on Central Time or Eastern Time?
Central
Love that. Go ahead, sir.
in Destin, Florida.
Recommendation,
my
comment, and
is,
question. Yeah.
Yes. The comment is obviously, like everybody else, love your program, love your format. I worked with Newt Gingrich for more than 15 years, so I followed Sean for many years and love him. On Dan is fighting in my head between my favorite Democrat. You were Harold Ford. I think both of you are the most honest Democrats that I've come across. The idea is that I would love to see Elon Musk buy MSNBC and do a two-way on cable and have that the format of a new MSNBC. I think it would be a fantastic public service to have this format in a much broader way.
Stay tuned.
That'd be nice. As far as the question is concerned, now that the election is over, you guys have talked about so many topics. There's an old book back from the 1990s, maybe, by John Nesbitt, Megatrends. As each of your parties have discovered and thought about both the success on the Republican side, but there's also lessons to be learned there, and also on the Democratic side, both the pros and the cons. Are there a couple of mega trends that are going on, and you can take it any direction you want, in general, in society, in politics, in electronics, internet, social media? I'm not quite sure, but are there some mega trends that we ought to be looking about that more than just an election of Donald Trump that we can see move forward, especially on the Republican side, to maintain control more than the next 4 years, or on the Democratic side of moving from what I think is the far left progressive part of the party, which really hurt them, I think, in the election and may hurt them if that becomes the core. So my question is, any particular mega trends that you can see or can share?
I'll go first. I see four traits that I think are powerful, and they happen to be four traits that we think are reflective in this platform, but you also see them in John Fetterman. Okay. One is authenticity. One is accessibility. One is community. And one is elevating the voices of real people over elites. And I think those four things, whether it's media or a politician or a business, I think those four things are super powerful, and all of them are enabled by technology, but they're also very human. You know, community is extremely human. People wanting community. We build community here through this platform, and I think it's a big part of the reason why people like it. Dan.
I think those are four great things. I mean, I think politically, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, and Mark's been, very early on this theme, the kind of collective outside infrastructure that Republicans have, or really that Trump has. And I think to Sean's point, a lot of it is organic. Trump is the only person I've seen that has maintained an intensity for now 9 years. Usually after, a couple of years of governing, it starts to collapse. There's something real there. And I think everything Mark just said goes into why that has been so successful. And I think it's sweeping parts of the world. And for the Democratic Party, there is nothing even close to that.
Yeah, I wrote three things. And ironically, the first one is the same as what Mark, I said: authenticity, populism, and emerging media. And I think that I don't disagree with any of what Dan or Mark said, but I think it's kind of, they're very overlapping. So I'll leave it at that. But I think those are the three that I just came to the top of my head when you asked the question.
Ronald, thank you. Appreciate you joining. Thank you for the thoughtful question, and we hope you'll come back and for the suggestion. And as I said, stay tuned. All right.
Thanks.
Let's go to Paul, welcome in. Thank you for joining. Tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind, please. Got unmute. There you go.
Am I on?
Yes, sir.
You're on.
Well, I'm a New Yorker who lives in France. And
Okay.
I'm addicted to two-way because I'm learning a lot about a lot of things. But what I want to say right now is that after watching two-way last night, I watched some of the Hegseth hearings as much as I could stand. And I don't want to come across in the wrong way, but I was really shocked by the Democratic women particularly. And it made me worry about the future of women in politics, given a lot of things that we've seen. And that could be a disaster, particularly the issues that they were dealing with. You know, this women in combat thing.
Paul, I'm sorry to interrupt you briefly. I'm going to bring Sandra in because she, I think, has the same point of view. So I just want to add her to the conversation. But you keep going, Paul, and then she'll chime in.
Well, so I'm just curious if anyone was as
Can you
really
just
horrified as I was.
say a little bit more of how you characterize what you saw and why it concerned you?
Well, it seems like it's so deeply ideological, so unhinged from any reality or even how other people might see them, that one can't say, you know, how can these people be in government? And the thought that came to me was, you know, something's going to happen. You know, they're setting up Trump to be a dictator. They announce that he's a dictator, and they're kind of pushing him into that in a way. And,
Paul,
and
can you give me an example? Like, I'm just trying to understand, was it the questions that they asked, the subjects, and anything in particular that you think really exemplifies what you're talking about?
Well, the attitude, the aggressiveness, and the hammering, you know, trying to just being fixated on trying to, you know, get Hegseth to admit that he was a hypocrite about women. And it was so centered. It seemed like deranged feminism to such an extent that it alarmed me.
And Paul, you didn't see the same thing in the male Democratic senators?
Well, I didn't like that, but I didn't see them as being quite so. You know, I could get that. You know, one thing I'm learning from two-way is you guys are insiders. So I'm learning a lot of things about how politics works, how Washington works that I never knew before. And that kind of softens my reaction to these things because you explain how, you know, this is how the game works and so on. But still, you know, I don't like it. I've never liked it.
Yeah.
But
Sandra, let's let Sandra. Sandra, what are your thoughts on what Paul's saying and on the hearing?
Yeah, I agree about the aggressiveness. And I know in other hearings, this grandstanding occurs, but I think the Democrats and especially women have not learned a damn thing about why Trump won. And as a lifelong Democrat, I am so disappointed. And I've toyed with the idea of becoming an independent, but I just did it. I went online and I am now changing to an independent. And Dan, I wish you were the strategist for this administration, because when will they learn? Why didn't they read Mark's first book? You know, why aren't they learning? I can't understand it. And if one, you know, I had to shut it off. I didn't even see all of the women. I did hear who was it, Kane, that ran with Hillary.
Infidelity. Yeah, and the drinking.
And he was awful too. I thought, what the hell? And we didn't get to any content I mean, Sean, do you really think Hegseth is a qualified candidate? Please tell me the truth.
Absolutely. Look, the bottom line is you got somebody who's got dirt on their boots, who's served in combat.
And you know, as I agree as a retired nurse, I always wanted them up on top to come down to the actual working. But as far as an administrator. Now, will the deputy like help him? Like, is there somebody that's experienced with the Pentagon? Like for the minutia, not minutia, but the stuff that he maybe doesn't have.
So
Who's
there's
going to
two things I
help?
would
Who
say. Look,
knows what the hell they're doing? That's what I want to know.
I would just say this: when you can't pass an audit for 8 years in a row, I'm not sure that speaks
Yeah.
volumes to the
Yeah.
current pool of folks.
Right.
And that obviously extends on a bipartisan basis. There are a lot of people, I mean, especially at DOD and in the Pentagon in particular. And by the way, the one thing that makes DOD in particular unique is that you've got this combination of uniformed and civilian leadership that
Mhm.
is really a unique aspect of that one department in our government. And so I do think that like the deputy in a by statute has to be, I think, an accountant, or there's some other aspects of that the deputy SecDef has that allow that to be the case. And I think, frankly, you're going to see that throughout the Trump administration, where the secretary
Yes.
or the leader of a department or agency is going to be one person, and then the deputy is going to be sort of your COO or your XO, depending on your mentality and how you look at things. But that's, I also, I mean, like I said, I look at a lot of this and say, okay, well, let's look at the people that we've had run DOD on a bipartisan basis the last several, and you go, maybe it is time we look at things differently, and that we're preparing for the threats, and that we get somebody who thinks about the budget and make sure that the priorities are straight. I mean, like I said, I took to heart yesterday Tim Sheehy's question, the new senator from Montana, former Navy SEAL. I mean, shipbuilding doesn't happen in a day. We are not equipped
ready
to take on the threats. And so again, having somebody that says, yeah, I get it. I know what it takes. I understand that when pilots can't get the hours, that the planes are going down in a way that, from a future standpoint, that we don't have the munitions, the ammunition. I mean, I'd rather have somebody from a warfighting standpoint that says, look, the job of the DOD is to make sure that we are ready to defend and protect the homeland. And so, I think it's time that we got somebody in there that understands the focus.
Well, I didn't vote for Trump. I don't like him, but I don't want us to fail. I do not want that. And I want our country to flourish. And that's really what I'm concerned about.
Good message there. Sorry, Mark.
No, you go.
Oh, I was just going to say, look, I think there's a history of people overreacting in these hearings. I mean, Hillary Clinton sitting in that Benghazi hearing when all these men were just like hysterical and pulling their hair out with like conspiracy theories, and she sat there calmly, right? Like memes broke out, like the whole 9 yards. So a little bit of grace here. Like it wasn't the party's finest moment. Some of these women, I imagine, don't feel great about their performance yesterday. And so if they do it over and over again, then that maybe speaks to it. I think the issue for the party is we have focused on the personal, right? We could not get past that Trump was accused of so many things, his business history, his personal conduct, and with his love life and January 6th. And we haven't focused on the substance of why he is so popular. And I think Hegseth kind of brought that stuff back up, right? I mean, to Sandra's point, there is so much personal concern about him, whether it's his management experience, alcoholism, et cetera. I think what Kane was ultimately getting at is the issue of blackmail, right? Like if you are a serial philanderer and you do it on the job, and could somebody hold that over your head? Kind of a house of cards type of thing here. But lost in it is, to the average American, they think most politicians are corrupt. They think, as the one senator said, the number of people who drink too much, who cheat on spouses, et cetera, is prevalent in Capitol Hill. And the party kind of just doesn't have much substance that it stands for. Harris had that problem. She had so little. So we'll get it right. We'll fix it. Just not soon.
Sandra, thank you for joining. Very grateful to you. Hey, Paul, how many direct flights are there a day from Paris to Washington, D.C.?
I have no idea.
No idea, but more than one.
Oh, yeah.
More than one.
I imagine. Oh, yes. There'd be several.
Yeah, there'd be several. So, Paul, wonderful opportunity to tell you and everyone else as we close up today. On February 2nd, am I right? Is it February 2nd? Yeah, February 2nd at 5 p.m. Washington time, Paul, you all can join Paul, Dan, Sean, and me,
Yeah, join me.
for our
Yep.
for our live event. Our live event. It's at a place called Pearl Street Warehouse. You see it there behind us. Sean says it'll change your life. It's like Xanadu and Wonka's Factory all in one. A live version of this program will be sitting there. You'll see lots of people you recognize in the room, not just Dan and Sean. February 2nd, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. If you want tickets, and I'm not just saying this to hype them, they're going very fast. So if you want to be part of the event, I urge you, when when the same time you book your horrible United flight, it's the Dulles, go on twoway.tv and buy your tickets. You can buy VIP tickets or regular tickets. Whichever you do, guarantee you'll have a wonderful evening. So please join us. And join me tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern Time when I'll review 6 confirmation hearings in one show. I'm going to do it like that guy who talked really fast, who used to do those ads. We're going to talk about the confirmation hearings, some other stuff that's going to occur today, I think, that you'll find interesting. And then tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern Time, we'll be right back here, and I'll be pressing Sean and Dan to be forward-looking, and people on Twitter will be telling Sean to stop interrupting Dan and for me to stop interrupting Sean. No one ever accuses Dan of interrupting, which tells you all you need to know. And we'll have a real estate update on where Doug and Kamala might live. Paul, thank you for joining. Thanks everybody for your questions. Sean, are you watching all 6 hearings today?
I'm only going to watch 5.
Okay, Dan, how about you? How many are you watching?
I'll have them all on all day.
Yeah, dabble all day. And now, if you need more Mark Halperin, switch over to SiriusXM because I'm going to go see Michael Smerconish for my weekly appearance, and see everybody at 6 tonight and 9 tomorrow. Sean, Dan, Godspeed, Hey Jude, peace, love, and understanding, and peace out.
And au revoir, as for our French guests.
And au revoir. And the nutmeg steak. Goodbye.
Bye.